This is SWM, Success with Music. Yo, what up, music fam? This is Walt. This is Success with Music. I am your music coach. And again, you're listening to SWM, Success with Music. This is a podcast for singers, songwriters, musicians, beat makers, music students. Yo, we are about the music life. Hey, again, I appreciate you guys tuning into the podcast. And we've been getting quite a bit of love from listeners all around the world. And I appreciate you guys, those who listen on a regular basis. If you are new to the program, by all means, I invite you to subscribe on your favorite platform, Apple Podcasts being a major one that we distribute our shows to. So if you want to keep up with episodes, go ahead over to Apple Podcasts and subscribe to the podcast. All right. So if you are just joining us here today, know that we are in the midst of a series and we're dealing with music production. And in the past few episodes, I've been going through a few tips related to some music production tips or music production ideas that I use to create some of my tracks. And I'm hoping that these ideas, you can incorporate them into what you're doing so that maybe you can have some additional ideas in your arsenal as you are going about that music life. Now, mind you, today is part 4 in the music production series. But here's the great thing. You don't have to go back to the first episode or listen to them in sequential order. Each of these 4 recent episodes deal with different aspects. So again, if you're listening for the first time today, if you're dropping in on what we're doing, you're not missing any of the other previous points in the other episodes. They're not building upon one another. They're just 4 different sessions on different tips. So hopefully that makes sense. And with that, man, I want to go ahead and get into session number 4 for today. Hey, I want to remind you guys, please cruise on over to successwithmusic.com. You can check out the other episodes. So if you are trying to locate the other shows that I mentioned, you can find them there. Just look for podcasts on our main page. Again, the website is successwithmusic.com. There you'll also see some things that we're doing with respect to in-class music training. You may be interested in learning a bit more about that. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it for today. All right, so I want to start off with an opinion that I have about creating music. Now, this opinion may get under the skin of some of you, so just kind of bear with me. Again, this is my opinion. So when I'm creating music, I try my best when I'm using my digital audio workstation and my software and things like that. I try my best to stay away from loops and audio clips. And I know that, again, may bug some of you. I know I've seen a lot of different artists and producers that is their thing. They go to a huge library of different loops and drum beats and drops and things like that, and they just put them into their music. I'm not a big fan of it. I've done it before, but again, I'm not a huge fan of it because for me, I feel like it takes away from the musicianship when creating, a song for your artist or for your own purposes. So I will admit, in this regard, I'm straight up old school. I'm from the mind, or I'm from the world where you create music from the ground up. You create your own concepts. You don't just mash up a whole bunch of sounds and say, hey, this is a track I made. To me, that's a different type of art form. I'm approaching this from a musician standpoint. So I like to create things from the ground up. Even if I create my own drum loop, I like to create that. I like to be in control of it. One of the reasons for it is it's mine, and it's likely that someone will not have the exact same type of loop. Sure, people can come pretty close to making the same type of sound if I'm using the same, plugins and things like that. But at the end of the day, how you choose the sounds and the volume and the filters and the plugins or what have you, it can still be very unique. And that's really something that I like. And I think if you can push yourself as a musician to be a creator versus being someone that does a lot of just mashing up of things, I think you'll go a lot further in terms of just being sought after as a creator. Again, that's my opinion. Some of you may differ in your thoughts about it. And if you do, I'd love to hear from you. We have a contact area on our website. Just go ahead and check it out and let me know your thoughts on it. Again, the website is successwithmusic.com. The things that I'm talking about today are the small, minor building blocks that I use to create original music. So I'm not going to talk about using loops. So the advice that I'm going to talk about today, or the tips that I use, really focus on you building your music incrementally, step by step, block by block, from the ground up. All right, so there's my little speech about that today. Let's go ahead and move over into my very first tip for you today. So I want to play a track for you that I made, or a song, or a music segment. In previous episodes, again, if you're just tuning in, I would play a piece of music and I would go back with that same piece of music and go through some different concepts and ideas that were used in that piece of music. Today will be no different. So I have a brand new small musical segment for you that I created, just a few bars here. I'll play the musical segment here and I'll go back and talk about 3 things that I would like for you to walk away with today. All right, so let's go ahead and play it. Here we go. All right, so there is the little musical piece here. So I want to focus on a lot of percussion related things for our discussion today. So I want you to focus your ear on the snare as we go through it. And I'm going to give you one of the tips that I use quite a bit when creating music, especially when I want to give my snare drum a bit more thump or whack or energy, however you want to put it. So I'm going to play the track one more time. Focus your ear on the snare, and then I'm going to come back and deconstruct this and tell you what's going on. Let me play it one more time as a whole. All right, let me stop it. So what's happening here is, I'll start with the first point here. I am using a small little sound effect just ahead of the snare drum hitting. And it doesn't happen every single time, but it happens incrementally. What I'm talking about here, I'm going to isolate the sound that is preceding or going just before the snare drum. It's going to be kind of low here, so you may have to turn your volume up. But let me play that sound for you, and I'll tell you what it is and why I have it there just ahead of my snare. Here we go. There it is. Here it comes again. And it comes a couple more times here. And I'll stop it right there. So that little small weird sound, again, is happening just ahead of the snare drum hitting. Again, not every single time, but I'll go back and I'll show you where. The reason why that little weird sound is there is I believe that when you use a sound like that, this kind of reversed sound, and that's really what it is, it's a reverse snare drum. And so let me take a quick aside here just to explain what I'm talking about. This is an audio file of a snare drum sound that's in my digital audio workstation. So that sound clip or piece, I took that single snare sound, I use the reverse feature in my digital audio workstation, and then the sound is basically playing backwards. And then on top of that, I have an envelope on it, so it goes from low volume to high volume very quickly. So it's just a quick reverse sound. So that's what you're hearing. That quick reverse sound I'm putting, again, just ahead of my regular snare drum sound. The reason that I'm doing that is I feel like the sound is sliding into the main snare. And in another way, I like to think about this is that it sounds like there's a whack to the snare, like a wind up and pow, there's a hit to on that snare drum sound. So have you ever seen those movies where there's like a fight scene and they're doing some kung fu or some kicking, punching, that type of thing? Have you ever noticed that when the guy throws a punch, you'll hear the guy's arm flying through the air and then you'll hear the punch, like whoosh, that type of thing? Again, it sounds kind of silly, but it happens in movies all the time. There's like that whoosh sound that flies to the air and then the psh sound. Again, it's kind of a dumb example, but I think it kind of suits the episode today. There's a slight sound and then there's a pow sound on the snare. To me, when you do that, it feels like it hits harder, though it's really not hitting harder. So again, I have the wind up sound, which is a reversed snare, and then we have the actual snare sound. So let me play the snares for you, and I'm going to isolate them or solo them, and you're going to hear what I'm talking about. Let me play it. Here it is. All right, let me stop there. So again, all of them did not have the wind up to the snare. And actually there's one snare missing, so I'm going to drop that one in there because there's one that has a big kind of a open, airy sound. So let me put that one back in there because that actually adds to the effect. So let me play it again. There we go. All right, so now that I added that other one, that other sound, that the snare with the reverb on it, you can kind of tell that wind up leads into that big, open, airy sounding snare drum. So again, what's happening here is that wind up leads right into that big, open sound, and it feels like it's hitting really hard. So let me talk through this here. So let me play it one more time. Here's the wind up, and then you hear a snare and then a wind up. Okay, here's just a snare. Here's a wind up again. Here's a wind up. And here's another wind up. Okay, so again, that wind up sound, as I'm calling it, it's not happening every single time. But again, I feel like when you use that little small tip or trick within your tracks, it gives your snare more of a whack. It feels like it's more dramatic. It feels like it's hitting harder because it's almost like that example that I gave about that punch where the fist is flying through the air, and you have that sound that precedes the actual impact. All right, let me go back to all of the tracks here, or all the sounds, and I'll play them together and take a listen to it in context now that you know what's going on. Can't hear it? Here's the next one. Okay. Now, just for the sake of difference here, I'm going to take that wind up sound, as I call it. I'm going to remove it. So I'm going to just mute it. So here it is. I'm not going to play the whole thing here, but just hear a few bars of this music piece without that wind up. Listen to the snare. It sounds fine. I don't think there's a huge major difference, but let me throw it back in. Oops. Sorry, I hit the wrong thing here. Let me put it back in. Here we go. Okay, with it. One more time without it. Without